I'm Wesso. I'm one of the devs over at Beefy. Been around Beefy for, been contributing to Beefy for about 3 years. And so excited to talk about this movement to the xERC20 token. It's been pretty much what we've been concentrating on for the last 3 months. So excited to talk about it with you guys all.
Awesome. So maybe Vesa, you can kick us off by giving us, like the origin story of what's the role of Beefy token, and how does it accrue value?
Sure. So if everybody's aware of Beefy, that's great. But if you're not, Beefy is one of the largest auto compounders across now 20, I think 22, 23 different blockchains. We've been around for 3 years. We launched in October 2020. The token itself is the governance for the Beefy DAO. All of the contributors at Beefy are just contributors to the DAO, and the DAO runs the protocol itself. The token also historically has received governance rewards from the revenue on each of the isolated different blockchains. So if we launch on, let's say, Optimism, we would have a governance reward pool where we would have some sort of revenue share that would go to that governance reward pool on Optimism. And we do the same thing on Ethereum, Arbitrum, any of the blockchains we existed on. And that's how originally our infrastructure was structured. And then when we first started going multi-chain, we were one of the first protocols to, I think, sort of start dipping our toes into the multi-chain atmosphere. We originated on Binance Smart Chain. Our first chain was our second chain was Hecko, and when we launched there was a very low amount of bridge providers. It just wasn't as much competition as there is now, and we went with multi-chain, who was able to bridge our Beefy token from BSC over to Hecko. And as we progressed along and we started to grow, it was convenient for us to consistently work with multi-chain. And though multi-chain had some historical issues earlier on, for the majority of the time, they really didn't have a whole lot of issues. And so obviously, trust built up with their team. But then again, what we've learned is that, we sort of preach already with contracts and everything else is to not have to rely on trust, right? And then that was obviously proven with the whole multi-chain issue that happened a few months ago.
Okay, so I think you kind of touched upon like you guys were using multi-chain, and then because of the issues, you had to find different bridge providers. So I think this is also a good time to give Max the floor, and he can talk about xERC20 and bridge token standards in general.
Yeah, sure. So the xERC20 standard is an open bridge agnostic token standard that actually emerged and was proposed as an Ethereum improvement proposal right after the multi-chain issue. So the multi-chain being forced to be shut down was kind of a wake-up call for a lot of projects on how bridges are actually in control of bridge tokens across the different chains. So for a token issuer that moves their tokens across the different chains, when they use a bridge by a normal standard, whether they are proprietary standards or just facilitating a transfer by native bridge, they actually lose control of the token contracts on the destination chain. So this was very evident during the multi-chain issue, where multi-chain was forced to be shut down, and so all the tokens that have been bridged on another chain have been locked there for forever, because the token issuers, so the projects, the protocols, did not have any way to bring the tokens back. So this kind of generated a kind of a cataclysm in the industry, and one of the results was that other bridges, other interoperability protocols were trying to replace the multi-chain, the position that the multi-chain had in some of their ecosystems, for example, on Phantom, by trying to lock projects in new token standards, their proprietary token standards, and then incentivizing liquidity, so paying a lot of incentives to create liquidity and adoption on a Phantom ecosystem. So Connect instead, we were looking at everything that was unfolding, and then we realized that this was not sustainable for the industry. This is not like the best. This is not how we create better value for everybody in the space, but it was just kind of trying to segment and segment the liquidity and lock in token issuers into one specific standard or proprietary standards. So our co-founder Arjun put up an Ethereum improvement proposal saying, hey, ERC20 as a standard, as a normal standard, was not designed to be working on a cross-chain world. So let's create a better way, a better standard, a better framework for projects to bring their tokens across the different chains. It solves two major issues. The first one is the lack of ownership. As I said, when you bring your token to another chain using any of the bridges today, you are locked in forever with that token standard, no matter what. And number two, because every bridge is trying to create its own proprietary standard, its own proprietary silos, this creates a fragmented and isolated liquidity. Every bridge basically mints its own version of the tokens, and these versions are not fungible with each other. So whether if you bring your tokens to one chain using a native bridge like Optimism, or if you bring it by Connect or by Axelar or by LayerZero, all these will create different versions. And because they're not fungible, they're not compatible with each other, you are actually creating isolated pools. So this is the problems that the xERC20 standard tries to solve. How can we want to have projects retaining control and ownership of the tokens across the different chains, and not being locked in with a specific bridge, but the token issuers can decide which bridges are basically allowed to be using your tokens and allowed to be bridging your tokens, and they will be minting the same version. I'll stop here. I'm happy to go into more details, but I hope this clarifies a little bit our vision and our approach on how we're trying to do things.
Yeah, I'd like to go over some of the historical problems we faced, because it's easy for people on the outside to say, for Beefy to just migrate away from multi-chain or make it like a decentralized version of the token. There's no way. There was really no way to do that. Like we could basically, what other protocols were doing if they didn't want to avoid the situation we got into, was they would launch their own token on, let's say, another chain. Mint have like basically the DAO or the dev team or whatever be able to mint and burn as many as they want, and they would basically seed two sides of the bridge. So you would have like tokens sitting in a contract on Ethereum and tokens sitting in a contract on Optimism that were just kind of minted out of thin air, and that would allow basically the free flow of assets between the two chains. And so there's obviously that way to do it. And if you wanted to see different bridges, I guess you could see different bridges. But before xERC20, basically that's how you had to be able to adapt in order to have multiple bridge providers. So if you're a protocol like Beefy who's on 20 different blockchains, maybe the bridge that you want to work with isn't available on 20 different blockchains. If you want to have your token on 20 different blockchains, then you're going to have to now have a fragmented approach to different bridge providers. Then what we talked about, which is one of the major issues, is now you have like a multi-chain version of Beefy. If I have an Axelar version of Beefy, now I have two versions of Beefy on the same chain. We need to be able to have people transfer from one token to the other token if they wanted to bridge using a different provider. So what does that mean? That we have to spend probably in like dollars on liquidity incentives in order to have a liquid market between the two bridge versions of the token. It becomes just unsustainable at the protocol level, It becomes a waste of incentive money to incentivize liquidity on two different token standards. It increases your risk. You place a lot of trust in even the dev team to just mint and burn things out of thin air. So I think that there was just so many reasons that the way things were set up before multi-chain was just broken. And we didn't really have a great solution or a great thought on how to change things. And to be honest, like with all of the different liquidity markets we had on all of the different blockchains, it was such an overwhelming task in order to get out of multi-chain's grasps and into something else. So until they sort of had this issue happen, it was kind of the thing that needed the catalyst that needed to happen in order for us to basically shake up our entire infrastructure, uh, which ended up costing us like 3-4 months of development time in order to basically go and grab every single address that owns Beefy in every single contract, liquidity pool, lending market. It's pretty crazy to try to get all of those addresses and make sure all the data is correct on so many different blockchains with so many different issues with RPCs and whether or not people are in contracts like multi-sigs where their addresses don't transfer from one blockchain to another. So it was a giant task. Um, but I think what xERC is really trying to solve is you're absolutely right. As soon as multi-chain had their issue, it was like, okay, let's replace something with multi-chain again. And to us, it just like felt like, okay, well, we already been in this experience where we are completely locked in with a specific bridge provider, and where obviously it's a little bit different. Multichain had a lot of control over our token. They actually were the owner of our token. I think with some of the LayerZero tokens, I'm not sure with Axelar, but the ownership of those tokens themselves, they give over to the DAOs, but it's still locking you into the same token standard, which is relying on their infrastructure. Uh, this is bad for a few reasons. Obviously, one of them is that well, let's say you want to go to a bridge that they don't, their infrastructure isn't on, or bridge to a different chain, then you're kind of in a bad situation. Um, Two, we get rid of competitiveness amongst protocols for fees. So you kind of just give way to, hey, we have to lean on these protocols to bridge our tokens, so they could raise fees technically as high as they want, and you're kind of at their will, right? Like if they wanted to add now like bips on the amount of tokens that you bridge, I mean, possibly they can do that with their infrastructure. So like you start to get into a situation where, okay, now you're locked in with this specific bridge provider, and you can't even really have the free market compete and bring down fees for the users. So there was just so many reasons why we decided, hey, like we want the complete freedom. If anybody should own the tokens, own the rights to mint and burn and add bridge infrastructure and choose whether or not we want to have fees charged to our customers, it should be the DAO itself. And xERC20 gave us the opportunity to basically just utilize our own messaging adapters and plug those into the xERC20 tokens, which allows us to then basically use any messaging protocol in order to act as our bridge. And then what we do now, if you actually go on the Beefy site, beautifully done by our UI devs, it'll show you the time it takes for the bridge transaction to happen, and then also the amount of fees. So it has like a competitive fee market between every single messaging provider listed right on the app page. So you as a user don't have to rely on, hey, Beefy said I have to use Axelar. No, we'll give you the choice. You can choose whichever, you want to use CCIP, you can use CCIP. You want to use LayerZero, you want to use Axelar. We'll show you as basically an aggregated market who who exactly is available for those specific blockchains, and you can make the decision as a user based upon like whether or not you want to rely on speed or you want to pay less fees or whatever, and let them compete with each other. And that way, if one of the providers starts to price themselves out with fees, then that's their own fault, and the users are making the decision on whether or not they want to use them.
That's great. Thanks a lot. So, I think you covered so many points that we wanted to touch upon as well. One of the things that resonates with me the most is how there's a competitive market for AMBs right now with xERC20. So I was actually on the Beefy's interface before the call, and then I was trying to bridge from Optimism to Ethereum, and you can clearly see that like there's a competition between the bridging providers in terms of both speed as well as the gas efficiency, right? So one of the points that LayerZero makes with OFTs is that there is still a competition in OFTs where you can choose the validator network that is gonna verify your message, but still like there's no competition in terms of gas efficiency, which is what like we can see on xERC20s. So I want to bring like just roll back a bit and then talk about what is actually the need for a token like Beefy to go cross-chain, or why would a project take their token cross-chain in the first place? Like for example, Uni does not have Uniswap doesn't have Uni token on any other chain apart from Ethereum because it's just ownership, right? And they don't intend to go to cross-chain as far as I've heard. So what was the need for Beefy token to go cross-chain? Like, can you touch upon that?
Yeah, sure. Originally, the need was our distribution of governance rewards. So that every single chain would have a certain amount of revenue, and those would get distributed back to the people that are sitting in the governance rewards pool. And so people needed to have Beefy on the specific blockchains in order to stake it and earn a portion of the protocol's governance rewards. This last change has allowed us to completely overhaul our infrastructure, where now we are actually utilizing several bridge providers to bridge stables all the way back to Ethereum. And so every single one of the chains that we operate on, all of that revenue flows all the way back to Ethereum and is given away in one governance reward pool, which means that we don't need to have Beefy on 20 different blockchains. So at this point, the main reason that we have Beefy on Optimism, which is our second blockchain now with the new Beefy token, is because honestly, the price to keep liquidity or to keep thick liquidity is quite high, no matter where you go. And we were given obviously some grant funding in order to incentivize liquidity for the Beefy token that we'll have for probably the next year over on Optimism. And so we're able to utilize that to have a large liquid market for our Beefy token. Also, gas costs are just intense, especially if we start to see the next bull market happen. They start to spike over on Ethereum, that we sort of isolate a lot of I think small holders of the Beefy token, and accessibility to obviously get into the Gov Vault and then also to trade. And so we wanted to have now, instead of bridging the Beefy token itself over to Optimism, we'd pre-stake people into the Gov Vault. That way they have complete access to rewards, sort of like wrap staked ETH now on Optimism. And then since it's on a cheaper chain like Optimism, they're able to make trades and be able to trade the token with a lot cheaper gas costs. And so this would allow smaller users to interact with the protocol as well and to be part of the governance structure.
So with the xERC20, since you're using multiple bridges, is the gas cost lower than a single standard, or like is it more?
Is the gas cost lower than what? I'm sorry.
Like the other token standards, because they're just using a single bridge, right? Whereas xERC20 would take codes from other bridges as well.
Yeah, honestly, some of the other bridges are using like a bit fee on top. So if you transfer like 100, Beefy, they charge you a percentage of the total you're bridging in order to accommodate some of the fees. And some I know up and coming providers also want to do that. Whereas using xERC20, the way we built it, we're utilizing the underlying messaging providers, and we don't charge any extra fees to our users. So all they have to pay is the gas fee for the message, which makes it quite cost efficient. I think for like bridging over from like Ethereum to Optimism, we have the Optimism canonical bridge actually plugged in as an adapter, which should be the one you probably use if you're going from ETH to Optimism to bridge Beefy. And that gas cost is just the gas cost to send the message. which I think is anywhere from like $5 to $10, depending on the gas pricing. And that accommodates up to like, I think, 2,000 gas limit over on Optimism. So we can clearly execute without having to pay any extra gas for that message to utilize the canonical bridge. So, you know, I think overall, you know, all you're really doing is minting and burning. And so the gas to execute is like, I think, 300,000 or 400,000 gas limit, which makes it quite cheap, I think, to utilize this approach instead of having to utilize the underlying bridges.
Okay, nice. I want to go back to Max a bit now and ask about like the origin of xERC20, right? So you spoke about how Connex thought of xERC20 after multi-chain hack, and there was a need for this token standard a few months back. So I want to ask about like how Connex is still involved in this standard. Also, how much do you guys see Connex being attached to this token standard, or do you guys want to make it like fully open and completely detach yourself? And a follow up to that is that how helpful was Connex to Beefy in launching Beefy token?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We believe that the xERC20 is it should be as open as possible, like a true standard that is bridge agnostic, that is an open technology that everybody can work on. And so we're working right now to make it as independent from Connex as possible. Of course, we want to be involved. Of course, like we want to be part of the ecosystem. We believe that the standard is a win-win basically for everybody in the space, whether it's token issuers, whether it's bridges, whether it's aggregators, it's dApps and so on, and users ultimately, of course. Not only because, as Wizo was correctly saying, there is better competition on the pricing side, but also because we believe that if if there is no lockups on the liquidity side, so if every bridge interoperability protocol is able to mint tokens with the same efficiency, with the same capital efficiency, then the focus of projects, the focus of token issuers can shift around the security. So they will hopefully start to look at, okay, which bridge architectures are actually the most secure, and then those type of bridges will be given the highest rating limits. So you can assign for every bridge a specific minting limit, meaning that they can move a certain amount of tokens at maximum per day per every specific asset. And so once people start to look into the security models of the different bridges, they will realize which ones are worth endorsing with higher minting rights. And so the objective right now, for Connex is really to spread the awareness of the standard, both across the different bridge providers, because we believe that this is a better way to compete in the space, right? It's a form of competition, a mix between cooperation and competition that is more healthy, right? It doesn't rely on incentives, so it doesn't rely on bribing basically projects to do different things, but on the actual technology. And it's a better way for token issuers, of course, to give them all the freedom and empowerment that we discussed about. So really, the idea is that yes, Connex is trying to, of course, is trying to push for the standards, but gradually we're seeing more and more interest from the different ecosystems. So both the big chains, the layer 2s are starting to adopt the xERC20 standard. The different bridges are now embracing it with the recent communication that the open call for bridge standards that were pushed out by several players in the ecosystem. There was kind of an endorsement and a acknowledgement from the industry that yes, there is a problem with standard, and yes, there is a way to solve it, and we should all work together. And I think gradually as we refine a little bit the vision and the approach and how the tech stack should look like on the different levels, we'll get to a stage where the xERC20 will be considered the default, as the ERC20 is, or as RaptETH is. You don't know, like you don't think about who actually introduced the concept of RaptETH, but it's nowadays an adopted standard for wrapping ETH, and the same way xERC20 should behave in the space.
So I think the second part of the question was also that how does Connext help for the time being, right? Like until there's some momentum for xERC20, and it just becomes a standard that for almost all cross-chain tokens, right? So how does Connext help a project take their token cross-chain right now?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Hey, Max,
first point,
you should. I think the volume of your mic is like quite low. So can you like speak up or probably move closer to the mic?
yeah, I hope it's a little bit better now.
Yep.
So yes, we're trying, of course, to support the xERC20. The basic, the first step in doing that is by raising awareness, right? A lot of projects still do not know about the standard, do not know about the concept of open standards, do not know about the risk of being locked with proprietary standard. So we're trying to raise awareness with them, and then we're trying to support all the projects that want to actually upgrade or create their tokens as an xERC21 in actually doing so. So there is a group on Telegram, which is the xERC20 builders, where a nice community is being formed, and people are trying to support each other in understanding both the designs and the architecture of the standard, the different approaches that can coexist, and how to actually make it happen. And so our engineers now are actively supporting the different projects in helping them understanding the trade-off, but also actually completing the upgrade. I would say, maybe the Beefy guys can can confirm, we're getting to a stage where it's almost as a full self-service process, where you might seek guidance from Connext or other bridging protocols, other builders. But the idea is that every project should be autonomous to really upgrade their tokens, create the cross-chain tokens, and then selecting the different players, bridges they want to work with. From our side, of course, we do our best to support also the integration. Of course, if you want to select Connext as one of the supported bridges, that's fantastic. But regardless, we are really trying to work as a public good in this in the space. So how do we benefit the ecosystem? How do we create more value for everyone? How do we avoid silos and locks in, which is kind of the principle of Web3?
So I can say that I think what's funny, I didn't really ever hear of xERC20. So when the multi-chain stuff happened, we actually had somebody from Connext come in and say, "Hey, did you take a look at our EIP?" At that time, I was already like doing my homework on all the other different possible bridge tokens. So I was looking into Axelar tokens, OFTs, um, and I quite like all of the protocols that we're working with. Axelar, Chainlink, LayerZero. I've used them for a variety of different use cases. Um, I'd say that there's no lack of strong BD in any of these protocols. They're very helpful. They're very open to questions. And we actually use them, obviously, their underlying infrastructure for our bridge adapters. So they are very, very important. But we just obviously decided to go in a different direction when it came to the actual token itself, just to promote competition, not lock us into one specific provider, although we have a very good relationship with each of the providers. Connext offered assistance, answered all the questions we needed. We actually probed them for an audit on the xERC20 token, and they got that done pretty quickly, and made the updates to the repo. So we worked really well with them, and we're not actually even connected using Connext yet. So it was definitely no like, hey, you only can have all of this. We're only going to work with you if you can use Connext. It was very much about promoting the xERC20 token and to see utility in action. And obviously, we're going to plug in Connext here shortly. It's on our bridge provider to-do list. But there was definitely no reciprocal like you have to do this in order to receive assistance for us. They were very open to providing advice, to working with us. Like I said, getting the audit done pretty expeditedly, without any sort of like ask from us on our side. And so obviously we want to give that back. I'll if any project or protocol wants to talk through our development with the xERC20 and how we sort of like went to market with it, they can always reach out and talk to me on Telegram, Discord, whatever, and I'll help give some of that back in feedback and guidance as well. I could tell you that the xERC20 though is a utility, right? So you're able to utilize it in order to build bridging infrastructure. But what we don't have yet is, I think, an easy plugin for each of these different protocols, so that protocols can come in with any zero knowledge of building cross-chain contracts, and then just kind of plug in their newly created from the factory xERC20 token. We had to specifically build bridge adapters. And so when you're building bridge adapters and you're making cross-chain calls, uh, there are a lot of risks involved. And so you have to sort of understand or maybe have some knowledge and make sure you're reading all the documentation of the messaging providers you're utilizing. Because there's definitely a lot of gotchas when it comes to implementing cross-chain messaging and making sure that the correct message is being executed on whatever the chain that you're executing that message on. OFTs nicely sort of like help with this already, because they kind of have all of those validations already built in the OFT contract. So when you're plugging in with an xERC20, you do have to sort of watch out for, hey, if I'm going to build my own custom bridge adapter, where are the specific things that I can get hurt, or where is somebody going to try to attack this adapter? And so having some knowledge about working with these protocols or going to them directly and asking specifically what they have to look for, it is very helpful. Similarly, like Open Zeppelin has a optimism bridge contract you can sort of inherit, and sort of does the checking for the X domain messenger and stuff like that. So there are sort of things, if you're a developer, to look for when you're starting to build out your infrastructure to accommodate the xERC20 token. It's not quite there yet when it's just like sort of like plug and play, but it's definitely a good utility.
Another question I wanted to ask you, Weso, was about the rate limit. So right now, you guys have equal 2.5K per day rate limits per bridge. So I wanted to ask you, like, how did you come up with how did you decide that number? Is it more like the 7-day challenge period number, or is there like more logic behind it?
Yeah, so the total supply that'll ever exist of Beefy tokens is 80,000. And we looked at like our largest holders, which I think was maybe like close to 4,000, so 3,600 or so. And so we wanted to accommodate enough bridging so people that are able to freely flow their assets through, and not have to wait for it to recover, because I'm not sure if everybody knows how it works, but it's not like you bridge 2,500 Beefy over from ETH to Optimism, and now the bridge is just broke until people bridge back. It's actually like kind of refills itself every second, so you can start to get more bridging capability back. So it's a daily like basically limit, uh, and that's both on the mint and burn side. And so what we wanted to do was, at least in the beginning, have enough where the like larger users can sort of like move their funds and not sort of completely run dry provider. with the goal in mind of continuous monitoring of maybe like what daily transactions look like, and sort of bring down risk, whether that means like lowering limits with specific bridge providers that aren't really being highly used. Um, or if we decide that like the canonical bridge needs higher limits, we can do that. So it was a starting point, I think, for us based upon the amount of Beefy is held by the largest wallets, and then obviously what we were kind of predicting would be the bridge amounts per day of the Beefy token. And what I suggested and what we've done at protocol level is we set up monitoring services so that we see, above a certain amount of tokens being bridged, we can check those transactions just to verify that everything is working accordingly as another security.
Awesome. It's great to know that you guys thought about this so deeply and came up with a number. So I think my last question here would be about, like, what do you guys think uh, about the future of a token standard like xERC20? So this question is more for Veso and Max, and then I would like to give the floor to Akshay to just talk about how an aggregator like Li.Fi plans to support xERC20 or an OFT.
And anonymity.
Sorry, Arjun, was that for me?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe you can give us your thoughts on like the adoption of xERC20 in the near future and how that will play out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the EIP, of course, was pushed out by Connex, but the idea is to really spread out the adoption across different bridges, as we said, and different ecosystems. So, just the other day, we pushed out an open call for Open Bridge Standards, which was signed by a lot of the big players in the space, including, of course, Li.Fi, but also Cross, Heller Network, Router, ChainSafe, Socket, the Hashi protocol, and then also Synapse. The big players are starting to look into that, and I think gradually it will spread and it will become really the default at some point. And so it's important that all the players at the different layers of the stack will embrace it, and then will also support it so the users can benefit, and then include, of course, the aggregators like Li.Fi and the amazing work that you guys are doing. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the xERC20 is being integrated into both your architecture and your UI, so that when a user wants to go from one chain to another one, they can always find the most capital efficient way to do it. Right? They don't have to go through pools anymore. They don't have to go through AMM. There is no slippage. And then they are routed automatically into the bridges that have liquidity and that have the lowest cost, as you guys already do. So yeah, really excited about this future that is more capital efficient for projects, for bridges, and of course those efficiency are translated into better savings, more savings for the users.
So, do you have any thoughts on how you see the cross-chain space like changing with xERC20 and these token standards?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're highly excited about it. I think the fact that you can plug in multiple different bridge providers makes it much easier, but also xERC20 being able to utilize the messaging protocols and not rely on a bridge to sort of get your token ready or to get it plugged in gives you the opportunity to build cool products. So beyond obviously just bridging tokens, if you wanted to utilize xERC20 to build a cross-chain vault, or you wanted to do some cool cross-chain lending or something like that, you can sort of use the xERC20 as a base for those tokens in order to accommodate that and not have to rely on a specific provider in order to give access. So it does I think, take away some of the cumbersome things that were kind of make it a little bit hard in the past in order to build some cross-chain products. So beyond just obviously, getting protocols to use it for the tokens, I see it as a piece of infrastructure we can utilize for many cool things in the future. So I'm looking forward to playing around with it more, but I think we're going to see more people accommodate or bringing it on and utilizing it for new products that they're developing.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm also super excited about how xERC20 is going to change the landscape for bridges, make them more efficient, competitive. I think that's needed quite a lot, right? So nowadays, I feel like a lot of bridges that have, um, you know, big BD team can just like go out and then stretch their arms, just get all the projects and lock them in, right? That's what they want, and I would also want the same thing if I were any of those bridges. Like that's logical, right? But yeah, so I think to wrap this up, Arjun asked me to talk about how aggregators can help xERC20 in becoming the standard that it should be, right? But I actually want to ask Max this question instead of like me giving an answer here, because since you guys are actually a lot closer to xERC20, uh, how do you think an aggregator like LI.F can help xERC20 become the standard for cross-chain transfers? Like, how can we aggregate xERC20?
Yeah, I think I mean the best way, of course, is to support support the standard and by identifying first which tokens have the ability to move have actually been upgraded using the standard. So you guys should to find a ways to, and we're happy to support you in that, to identify how if a token is an xERC20, because that means that it responds to the criteria of being able to move across the different chains with zero slippage, and then being able to be routed across across several bridges. And so once you guys identify that a token that needs to be moved is an xERC20, then you guys can either wrap it if it's necessary, or route it directly through a supported bridge, and that will, I believe, create a positive flywheel, because you start having more volume across those tokens because they're more capital efficient, so they can move in a much more cost-effective way across the chains. Then, even for routes that do not directly involve those tokens, the swaps can happen by those tokens. So if they say that somebody wants to move a, I don't know, a token XYZ, and then there's highly liquid on destination chain and an origin chain with Beefy, for example, with the Beefy token. So it makes it capital efficient. It actually makes it efficient to first swap it for Beefy and then use Beefy to move it across the different chains, and then on destination swap it again. Right. So this becomes an incentive for people to adopt the standard, because it makes it extremely liquidity efficient, extremely capital efficient, and then it becomes a driver for these tokens to be moved across the different ecosystems. So I think the adoption of the standard is never something easy that happens overnight, but if we are tackling it from the different perspectives, right? More adoption for projects, more adoption for bridges, more adoption for ecosystems, more adoption from the aggregators like LI.F, then it's a self-reinforcing cycle that will ultimately end up in defining what the standard is.
That's great to hear. Yeah, so we are in touch with Connect's team and also the xERC20, I think, contributors to support xERC20 on LI.F and also on Jumper. There are a few things that we're going to have to figure out, like Max said, mapping these tokens somewhere. And supporting them on Jumper. Of course, like Beefy token can also benefit. Like any token that actually is, suppose this standard or goes to goes cross chain with xERC20 can benefit if a project like Li.Fi or Jumper supports that token. Like for example, if Beefy has this arbitrage opportunity, then the user is gonna choose, or Li.Fi is gonna choose Beefy to be the Beefy's bridge to be the bridge and swap bridge route. And then like in that way, there's like there's a swap transaction happening on Optimism as well. So it's like it's good for the Beefy LPs too, right? So there's a clear incentive for projects to launch as xERC20 as more projects start supporting the token standard. And yeah, like I said, we're also looking forward to it. But we're also gonna support all the other different tokens as well, including OFTs, ISTs, CATs, all of them. I think, and also, yeah, finally, I think it's time. We've spoken for almost 50 minutes about the standard, and it's great. I just want to wrap by saying that I'm actually super optimistic about the cross-chain future. Although although Vitalik doesn't like it, there are so many people talking against cross-chain or why are there bridges in the space and shit. But we are there to solve these problems, and we're here to abstract all the problems in the cross-chain ecosystem. Oh yeah, so finally, I want to give a few minutes for Veso and Max to just say closing words. Just like shield your project. Is there a new Beefy vault that I can just like ape into?
There's always the beefy vaults. I think we have something new almost every day. So I think we were on pace for like 2 vaults a day over the last 3 years for deployments. We've deployed over like 4,000 different vaults across the different blockchains. So there's always something new to look at and play around on Beefy. We just launched on Gnosis chain, and we have a few more blockchains coming up. Now that we're done with this Beefy transition, we can focus on better, obviously, user experience integrations and exploring to more blockchains. So hopefully we have some obviously integrations we've been talking for a long time with Li.Fi about coming up as well. So yeah, come join us in the Discord. Come ask questions if you want to integrate xERC20 or you want to utilize our knowledge on the process. And look forward to talking to you guys and meeting you guys.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wizo. And from the Connect side, a lot of things happening. As a reminder, Connect is an interoperability protocol that really allows you to create cross-chain applications, so applications that can live on multiple chain and interact with liquidity, data, users on any chain in a very, very secure way. Security is our number of focus. And there is a lot that is going on. Plenty of apps are actually in the pipeline and are working with us to launch the upgraded cross-chain version. So we are extremely excited about it. We'll also be launching to a few new layer 2s in the coming month. And of course, we also recently launched the DAO. So there is also a very interesting opportunity there if you want to get involved with the future of interoperability.
Awesome. Thank you guys for your time. And yeah, we can close the space.